The sun is breaking through. It's looking like a great rest of the week, and we are headed down to the University of Virginia. We've got Jennifer Lawless. She's the chair of the Political Science Department at Jefferson's University. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, how are you?
Very good. It has been a busy past couple of weeks. We almost saw one of the superpowers fall. We've seen the president's son being pleading to charges. Let's go though to a tape that CNN released. I can't even keep the days straight. I'm going to say last night, yesterday.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
The transcript of it they had released a week or so earlier, but it was quite compelling to hear former President Donald Trump talking about top secret documents, sharing it with people with absolutely no security clearance, being very frivolous about it. Your thoughts and how damaging is this for President Trump as he has to make a decision about whether he's going to go to trial?
Well, I think it's damaging for two reasons. The first is that it's one thing, as you alluded to, for people to read a transcript or hear anchors on CNN read a transcript. It's another thing to hear the former president, in his own words, talk about how he did not declassify information, about how he shouldn't be showing this to people, he shouldn't be sharing it with reporters, and he's doing it anyway in a flagrant kind of disregard for the law. Moreover, there's laughter in the background, like this is something funny and that national secrets and national security are a laughing matter. So I think the actual audio of that is damaging. But secondly, in a court of law, it's also a problem for him because this morning he was already trying to say that, he wasn't actually holding a classified document, that he never did anything wrong, that, what people heard is not what they actually heard. It's another example of gaslighting. And so it makes it very difficult for him, I think, to explain away what happened at Bedminster. And that might be more problematic for him regarding Jack Smith and, a grand jury than it is the American people who are either going to vote for him or not vote for him, regardless of what he does in this matter.
Yeah, so let's go to that. Listen, there were other people in the room. One of them provided that tape probably to the U.S. government. The same person or another person there provided that tape to CNN. So those are the people in the room probably are not desirous to lie in a courtroom or to U.S. investigators.
We're seeing that people that were part of Trump's inner circle are willing to remain loyal until it's their own neck on the line and they could potentially face contempt of court or jail time or anything else. And so I think Donald Trump, for the first time, is beginning to see that he can't necessarily count on people to be loyal to him when they have to make major sacrifices or break the law to do so. And we've seen that not only in what's going on now with releasing the tape from Bedminster, but in the entire Mar-a-Lago investigation. It was insiders at Mar-a-Lago that cued the special counsel and the FBI onto the fact that there were classified documents at the club.
There has been some reporting, and I can't remember if it was the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, about Jack Smith's track record and that he's not exactly been the best at hitting home runs on some of these high-profile public corruption cases. There was Menendez, the senator from New Jersey. That case kind of crashed into the rocks. He's been criticized by some of the judges for some of his actions in some of his other cases. Was this the right special prosecutor, and why was he the special prosecutor?
Well, I think he's known for being pretty fair. Whether he has a winning record or not is a different question. The other thing is he's not seen as, being in the pocket of liberal Democrats. And I think that was important as well, because if Donald Trump is going to be indicted, as he was for the Mar-a-Lago case, if he is for January 6th, it's important that the Department of Justice believes that they can make a case that there was no political vendetta being launched against the president. So, track record matters, but in this particular case, the evidence pretty much speaks for itself. I don't think you had to be, an amazing special counsel or an amazing prosecutor to be able to get the indictment regarding Mar-a-Lago.
Let's jump over to this weekend's bizarre, surreal, almost movie-like episode in which the head of the Wagner Group Prigozhin appeared to try and topple Putin as the head of Russia, took over a major military facility, then sent troops in, unclear how many troops. There's so few Western journalists now in Russia after the arrest of the Wall Street Journal reporter that it's very difficult to verify almost anything. But the coverage was confusing. The facts are yet unknown. Do you have any sense of what exactly is going on there, and how long will it take us to understand what is going on in Russia and what the longer term implications are?
Well, obviously, I don't know any. I don't have any insider knowledge into this one. I do think it's somewhat curious that Prigozhin is now in Belarus and hasn't been executed by Putin. So, I think that the dynamics here are more complicated than, first meet the eye. Also, the extent to which the United States knew what was happening. And with whom they shared that information is still a little bit unclear. The most important thing for the current situation, though, is I think it demonstrates a level of instability and vulnerability in Russia, and you can bet that Ukraine and Zelensky and the Western world are going to do everything they can to exploit that.
Do we think that Prigozhin thought he had a cue from a high-level member of the governing body in Russia that said, hey, if you do this and this, we'll join you, we'll take out Putin, and then that individual did not follow through and the whole thing unraveled?
It's hard to know, but the way that the entire thing occurred suggests that there had been some arrangement. It doesn't seem like it was just a random thought, like Prigozhin woke up in the morning and was like, yeah, today's the day. I mean, it seemed like there was a degree of coordination that did fall through. I have no idea with whom.
Let's jump over to my favorite subject, your least favorite subject, Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden has some tax issues that may or may not been anything more than a felony and could have been done administratively. There was a gun charge which seems significantly more serious. All of it has been pled down to misdemeanors. Is that the right message that the president's son may or may not have gotten special treatment? There's articles that say he didn't get special treatment. There's analysis that said he did get special treatment. Your thoughts?
Well, the gun charge, I don't believe was pled down to a misdemeanor. I think that if he gets counseling and then demonstrates that he's not at risk of doing the same thing again, it can actually be the charge can be diverted. But so that wasn't pled down. The felony tax charges were pled down to misdemeanors. I mean, I don't know. I do know that if you look at the types of penalties that are typically assigned to similar tax cases and to similar gun charges when somebody has an addictive history, the punishment that Hunter Biden got, the plea deal that he wound up, agreeing to, does not look completely out of whack. The other issue that becomes relevant here, though, is whether the perception of impropriety governs what's going on. And if it looks like the Biden administration played a role in trying to negotiate a more favorable settlement, regardless of whether that's actually what happened, that can be bad for the administration. So the optics don't look good, but it's hard to imagine any scenario under which the optics would have looked good. The Republicans will always say, no matter what, that he wasn't treated with the same kind of hostile, outlook as Donald Trump has been. Hunter Biden, of course, wasn't president of the United States. But, I think the Republicans will never think that the penalty is sufficient. And I think the Democrats are willing to say that the Justice Department did what they would do in any other case, and this was fair. So the perception will be politically charged.
Let's jump over to Kevin McCarthy. Kevin McCarthy was on Squawk Box on CNBC, I believe yesterday morning, and when asked the question about Donald Trump and the rest of the Republican presidential field, he said, well, maybe Donald Trump isn't our strongest candidate. That sent shockwaves. Was that, he then sort of backpedaled, but was that knowingly saying that and then knowing that he would backpedal sent a much bigger message to Republicans across the country, members of Congress, and the other presidential candidates to sort of stick in there and continue to be vibrant? Or was that just a misstatement?
Well, if he would have stuck to the statement, I think it could have conveyed that Donald Trump is not the foregone conclusion and that the Speaker of the House is going to let the election unfold the way that it unfolds. But he didn't, because he doesn't stick by what he says for more than 10 minutes. He apparently called Donald Trump, apologizing, groveling, offering him the world. Trump has basically said with a few phone calls he can get him thrown out as Speaker, which we know is true based on the 147 votes required to get him elected Speaker in the first place. And McCarthy is saying that his words were taken out of context. So, I think that we're back to where we were. He cannot be trusted. If any of the other Republican candidates or if any other Republicans in Congress are looking to him to sort of be a leader, to be an honest broker and consider the Republican field open, they're going to be sorely disappointed.
Let's leave Washington, D.C. and come right to little old Rhode Island. On Friday is the deadline to file papers to be a candidate in the special election for the 1st Congressional District. David Cicilline quit Congress to take a job over at the Rhode Island Foundation to help those in need for a salary of $650,000 annually, plus benefits. There are now, I believe, 16 stated candidates. They will have Friday's deadline, and then they need to get their signatures in to be a qualified candidate. They have about a week or so to do that. How many will we be left with, your guesstimation, at the end of this registration and filing process?
My bet is that we wind up with 10 or 11 at the end of the process. For some people, completing the paperwork and getting the signatures is going to turn out to be pretty onerous because there are not campaign staffs working, and some of the signatures won't qualify. Some people will just decide it's not worth it. They'll look around, see how many other people picked up papers, and realize that this is just not going to happen. But my bet is that we'll still wind up with a double-digit number of candidates. Also, I just want to note, it's possible to draw a $650,000 or $700,000 salary and still help the needy.
Yes, he's going to try and prove that, I assume. But he is going to collect the $650,000 salary plus benefits, whether he helps anyone or not. So he's in the plus column, regardless. Come back to the 1st Congressional District of those who are seeking to replace him. This race, we get bombarded every day. We've sort of taken the stance of we're not going to do formal interviews until people are qualified candidates. Despite the desire to get coverage for a white paper, we're going to wait until make sure that you're real. There's just so many candidates and so many pleading for coverage. We understand it, and we don't want to leave anyone out, but we also want to make sure that folks are real. I can't remember in Rhode Island a race like this with so many candidates, many of which are viable candidates at some level or another. Can you think of other races in which you've got 10, 12, up to 16 people running in a single party primary?
No. And other than at the presidential level, no. And we see how quickly those candidates wind up dropping out as well. I think part of what we're seeing here is the fact that there had been an open seat just very recently when Jim Langevin had decided that he was not seeking re-election, and people might not have thought that that was the right time for them. They might have been caught a little bit off guard. They might have figured it wasn't worth going up against candidates like Seth Magaziner or Alan Fung, who had statewide name recognition, but it might have planted the seed. So this might be a situation where, because the two open seats were pretty close together, there were these festering notions of a candidacy that didn't pan out when the CD2 seat was open that did this time around. So my bet is that some of that is what's going on, coupled with the fact that everybody knows whoever wins this seat is likely going to hold on to it for quite some time. So this is not a state with a lot of congressional turnover. If you don't seize the opportunity now, it's likely not going to come again.
And then Joe Sakarchi has been rumored, lots of sort of state house whispering about whether or not he would jump into the race. A ethics complaint was filed against him a few weeks ago. Yesterday, the Ethics Commission voted to move forward with a formal investigation. He didn't like that decision. He has his backup about the issue. Does that take him out of any ability to last minute jump into this race?
He could still do it, but I mean, he would be dealing with an allegation for the next 3 months, and coverage would largely be dominated by that, issue. So it doesn't seem likely, but stranger things have happened. He could also
Listen,
be a spoiler, right? I mean, like,
right.
he could go in, he has name recognition, he could not campaign that actively for a while, and then at the end make a big splash. He has the money to do it. So it's unclear.
Yeah, I believe he has $1.9 million in his state account. He would have to move those dollars over. There's a little bit of a complexity to it, but David Cicilline was very successful in taking his mayoral war chest and transferring it over, returning funds, getting donors to cut new checks to qualify as federal dollars when he ran in 2010. Listen, Professor, you've run for Congress in Rhode Island. You know the state exceptionally well. I understand you're down in Virginia, but talk about where we are right now and how you kind of handicap the field.
I mean, it's pretty remarkable that the field has remained pretty static from the first or second week of the announcement that Cicilline wasn't going to be seeking re-election, that there would be a special election. Sabina Matos positioned herself as the likely frontrunner, and she remains the likely frontrunner. She's been racking up endorsements. She's been getting national coverage. She's been connecting with people in DC who can help with fundraising. She's all over the place in terms of attending campaign events throughout Rhode Island. She's a statewide elected official, so she has name recognition, and she hasn't done anything to change her positioning in the race. And it just doesn't seem to me that any of the other candidates yet have broken in and made themselves the obvious number two, or have really provided a reason as to why she shouldn't be the next member of Congress.
How big was that Emily's List endorsement for her? There's two other viable female candidates. For her to lock that down, what does that say about how people in Washington perceive her?
Well, they perceive her as having the most credibility and the best likelihood of victory. So the Emily's endorsement, it's necessary but not sufficient that you have a pro-choice record and that you're going to advocate for women's reproductive rights. But you also have to demonstrate that you have a path to victory, that you have fundraising success, and that any support that they give you is going to be on top of support and an infrastructure that you've already built. And so an Emily's List endorsement confers a degree of credibility that is far more than symbolically suggesting that she's a pro-choice candidate. So it's a big deal. It also helps with national fundraising, and it basically sets her up as the DC candidate.
And how paralyzing is this for all the other candidates? We're going into July 4th. We really shut down from how Rhode Islanders live their lives from really this week straight through to about the second week, third week in August, when people sort of get back from the beach and vacations and kids are back in sports and getting ready for school. How frustrating is it going to be for all those other candidates to try and get their name out there during a period of time in which fireworks, hot dogs, Narragansett Beach, days off is really going to dominate?
Yeah, the summer is not an ideal time. There are going to be a couple of weeks left at the end of August and the beginning of September where they can really make a case. But, I think that the best thing that they can do between now and Labor Day is find neighborhoods where people are working and living for the summer. And, not the vacationing communities, not people that are out on weeknights, knock on every single door 5 times if you have to. But, it's going to be very, very difficult, and broad district-wide campaigning is going to likely fall on deaf ears.
Jennifer Lawless, the chair of the Political Science Department at the University of Virginia. Have a happy 4th to you, to everybody else. Stay tuned for much, much more on GoLocal today. We'll be breaking some stuff later on today, quite interesting. Stay tuned for updates and e-blasts on that as well. Everybody stay safe, and the sun is coming out.